Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, depending on where in the country you're joining us from. Welcome to the 2024 Latino Family Voices Survey uh, outreach and launch. We are glad and excited to have you here with us today, folks from all over the country joining us this morning, this afternoon, in what will be a very insightful conversation. My name is Javier Martinez. I am the Managing Director of National Policy for Abriendo Puertas, Opening Doors, a national organization that works with Latino families, with young children, and supports those families as they reconnect and launch their own leadership potential in their respective communities. We have a presence in over 40 states, and we are very excited and glad to be here with you today. I will be joined by a panel of experts, as you can see from the slides. We've got folks from all parts of the country who are invested and excited about the work ahead. We do have live interpretation happening for folks who would like to make use of that. Here are the instructions. You will click on the interpretation link at the bottom of your screen. That'll help. That'll allow you to select the language of your choice, either Inglés or Español, and you'll hear our live interpreter. Welcome, Edna Santizo, and thank you for your work. Most of the presentation will be in English, so the interpretation will be in Spanish. There is a piece of the presentation that will be in Spanish. So when we get to that point, we'll pause for a second so that folks can hit that interpretation link. Let me start off by telling you a quick story. I am based out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I live in a community that is in transition, right? We've got folks moving in and beginning the process of gentrifying the neighborhood, but we also still have a very grounded community of Latino, Hispanic, Chicano families that have been here in this neighborhood for generations. One of those is my little neighbor, who is now a high school student. When I first met him, he was in a difficult situation, difficult family situation, difficult social situation. But over the last 10 years, a village has been built around him, a village that has helped support him and his little sister through the local Little League, through the local church, through our local schools. And now this young man is flourishing against what many would consider all odds. I say that because in our work, I believe we are all part of that rebuilding of those villages that are helping raise our children, that are helping raise our families. And we are doing it everywhere from the national, federal level, through big policy, through big budget items. But more importantly, we're all doing it at the local level. We're doing it in our neighborhood. We're doing it in our school. We're doing it in our church. We are doing it in our own homes with our own families. Part of the work that we do at Abriendo Puertas and the work that many of our collaborators do alongside us is help rebuild that village, help people reach their full potential so that they can rebuild their own villages, so that our children have a bright future ahead, as they should, as they deserve. So without further ado, I'd like to get to our first presenter to help dive into the bulk of this report, which is our data survey that was recently completed. This is now the third iteration of the National Family Survey that Abriendo Puertas and Unidos US have spearheaded with the support of the experts at BSP Research. With us today to present the data is Dr. Edward Vargas, who is a big data policy expert who specializes on issues of race, ethnicity, health, immigration, and social policy. Dr. Vargas is a non-resident senior fellow in governance studies at the Brookings Institution, where Vargas has supervised the 2016 and 2020 collaborative multiracial post-election results. Dr. Vargas received his PhD in policy analysis from the O'Neill School of Policy and Environmental Affairs at Indiana University, and his master's in public health from the School of Medicine and Public Health at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Dr. Vargas is currently an associate professor at the School of Transborder Studies at Arizona State University and a non-resident senior fellow in governance studies at the Brookings Institution. Dr. Vargas, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for that warm introduction. I'm going to go ahead and put up the slide deck, and I know some of y'all came to see Dr. Gabe Sanchez, and um, I'm really happy that I could step in and talk to y'all about this data and the release of this data, which let's see if this slides. Are folks seeing the slides? I'm seeing two lines. Um, to talk a bit about the data, the methodology, and some of the main findings. I think in general, there's some really interesting outcomes and other things that one will need to dive into, I think, a little bit later as we start doing analysis and start thinking through some of these findings. Are folks seeing the PowerPoint? I'm seeing lines on my end.
Dr. Vargas, not yet. I think we've got a bit of a technical issue here. Stand by.
Okay. So I'll tell you a little bit about the survey as we wait. So this survey was conducted with a national sample of Latinos parents, about 1,500 respondents with Latino parents and primary caregivers of children 5 years of age or younger. This sample also included expecting families. This sample was able to oversample New Mexico and Los Angeles County as we thought some of the policies in these particular regions were important for this work. We fielded the survey between November 8th and November 27th in 2023. Okay, here we go. And this project and this methodology of the survey was collected through a blended approach, which included both web folks and telephone interviews. So these were both live calls and folks were doing this online. So it was a nice mix of landline, cell phones, web-based, taking it over your phone, and it was conducted in both Spanish or English at the preference of the individual respondent. These data are all weighted to ensure that the demographics of the sample match those defined by the census. Next slide. So I'm going to be talking a bit about the work on health and well-being, and particularly resilience as a proxy for well-being. Next slide, please. In particular, for example, we ask individuals about what are the most important issues facing the Latino community. And what we've been seeing, and other folks have been reporting about this, is addressing the rising cost of living and inflation, followed by improving wages and income, and addressing gun violence and mass shootings as we experience some tragic events that have been happening across the country. So in addition, lowering healthcare costs is also a top priority for Latinos. And going back to this, addressing the rising cost of living and inflation, you'll notice that some of the trends in this data really highlight how Latinos families have been dealing with the inflation, and what they've been having to give up, what childcare, how it impacts childcare, for example. Next slide. Due to inflation, and the rising cost of living, we asked Latinos, have you or someone in your household done any of the following to improve your family's financial well-being? Over 48% of Latinos said they're looking for a better paying job or promotion in current work. 36%, a third, saying that they're working an extra job. 22% of the respondents said they started their own business and side business, followed by none of the above. And I think the none of the above is something that at the bottom with the 21%, we'll see how maybe this is impacting other aspects of an individual's life, particularly what they do with that time, as we'll see later. Next slide. Other decisions, difficult decisions, folks have having to deal with. So we asked individuals over the past year, have you done any of the following to manage your financial situation due to price increases and the rising cost of living? And over 42% of our respondents said they've borrowed money from friends or family. They're using their networks. They're asking people. I know in my own community, they use tandas, in other words, money, ways to save money, and keep the money within the circle. Cutting down on spending and or using discounts and coupons while shopping, both in person and online. Also followed by 27% who said use up most of their savings to help pay for our family expenses. And this becomes, to the last Abriendo Puertas, where showed that a large majority of Latinos had less than $1,000 in savings. So I think this speaks to the importance of this time. Other things, and myself as, for example, a person who's interested in public health, I'm particularly interested in folks who said that they've either delayed healthcare, delayed going to the doctor to try to make these tough decisions when dealing with inflation. Next slide, please. We asked, this survey was really interesting in that we were able to ask parents about what is a successful future for your child? What career options would you like to see your child pursue? And over 37 of respondents said that they would like to see their child own their own business or become an entrepreneur. Followed by 34% of respondents who said healthcare. And as a public health person, the rise in healthcare industries is something that I would encourage all parents to consider to try to push their kids into that space. Followed by jobs in STEM or science, technology, engineering, or math-related work, accounting and finance. And then the ones that we saw less support is like real estate, the arts, for example. Next slide, please. Our next survey slide is about how you access healthy and nutritious food. And for the most part, a large majority, almost just under 60%, said that they need help in lowering costs for healthy food, which could mean more access to food pantries, for example, women, infant, and children programs, SNAP programs, which during the public health emergency period saw an increase in the use of, for example, SNAP, and also increase the dollar amount in terms of eligibility to receive those SNAP. And families we've talked to, they want to see that we continue with this public health emergency rules in terms of SNAP assistance. Next slide, please. All right, so when we asked parents about stress and anxiety, which was a theme, overall theme in some of this work, we asked, what additional support do you need as a parent or primary caregiver to help you manage stress and anxiety? Over 33% of respondents said they needed some personal time, whether that be meditation, exercise, some time to walk at the park, followed by emotional support, counseling, or therapy. Over 24% of the parents said that they needed some more social interaction with friends and peers. I want to highlight at the end of this figure is that I don't need any help or resources. And I want to stay here for a little bit because in some of the survey research that we've done about whether or not you've experienced mental health challenges, some prior research has shown that the number one thing that people do, right? Like, so you're telling me that you need to seek support for services. The number one thing that people say, so what do you do? What do you do? We see that people say, I talk to friends or family about it. Followed by, I did nothing about it. In other words, I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't want to see mental health professional. And you see that at the bottom where 24% say, I don't need any help or resources. What's really, I think, a bright spot here is that 28%, the second largest category, is that you needed some emotional support, counseling, or therapy, which is, I think, really important that we should highlight that I think support for counseling or therapy is increasing among Latino respondents, and this is really important. We know that in general, we're finding that men, particularly parents, dads, are becoming more isolated. They're becoming more lonely. There's some really interesting work coming out of the New York Times and other people that talk about this rise of loneliness among men. And so this third category of more social interaction with friends or families, I think really resonates with what we're kind of seeing nationally. Next slide, please. When we asked about policy support on do you support or oppose the following, there is large support for barriers to try to decrease the ability to uptake of Medicaid or CHIP, whether that be increasing the poverty threshold, or other types of strategies. For example, putting money aside in an account for children to be able to use later. Also see some interest in trying to think through how do we best structure the earned income tax credit. So families said, well, we should want to increase benefits, maybe increase the threshold of what you can receive in an earned income tax credit, but maybe other ideas of strategies to think about how do we, instead of giving the lump sum at the end, what if we can distribute this across a year? And I think there's large support for that particular policy change. Next slide. So turning over to education and childcare, some really interesting, next slide, some really interesting findings come out of this. One is accessing affordable, quality childcare learning. So we asked, to improve the well-being of children growing up in this country, what are the two most important issues you think the government should address? Again, access to quality, affordable childcare. Child safety is something that was a common theme in the survey. Also, the cost of college tuition, which is at 26%. Now, cost of college tuition is really important for Latinos for multiple reasons. One is that we have an increase in the rise of Latino students matriculating into college. One. With that, we're also seeing a disparity between boys and girls. So we are seeing that women are increasing at a really high rates, and we're kind of losing some of the guys here. So that's another trend. The third trend has to do, which is really related to cost of tuition, is that we find that Latinos live in what are called educational deserts. In other words, they don't live near a good, affordable four-year college relative to the general population, which again increases their cost of college tuition because they're having to leave and move up elsewhere to be able to access a four-year college education. So that's something else to think about here. Next slide. When we ask respondents about their child care costs and child care, strikingly, 51% of the children in this of families say that their child has never received child care. And of those who didn't, why didn't you? 34% said because it was too expensive. And on average, people are paying anyway north of $400 up to $800 per month per child. We know that child care is very expensive and very really hard to get into. For example, I have a 3-year-old, and getting him into a good child care center was really, really difficult. Next slide. When we asked them about child care, we asked, have you experienced any of the following in the past year due to challenges in one or more of your child care arrangements? And what we're finding is over 50% of the respondents said that they were either unable to work or they reduced their working hours because of having to deal with childcare. And I'm going to go back to this, but I think providing a high quality, affordable childcare is really important, and rethinking maybe Head Start programs. For example, the National Head Start program is one viable option I think we should really consider. Some countries in the world provide free childcare. So that's another thing to think about. Next slide. All right. So when we ask folks about the value of educators and quality learning, We ask how important is this that childcare meets your expectations of good quality learning. And again, parents want childcare centers that meet their expectations of good quality learning. They want their kids to be safe. They want these caregivers and educators to be paid a fair salary and in good working, healthy conditions. They also want these places to have well-trained and experienced educators who they can trust and leave their kid with. There, of course, affordability is of importance, as well as the convenient and desired location. We also find that over 91% of Latino parents want a childcare center that provides some form of bilingual or multilingual experience for their child. And this is particularly true in places, for example, that have large Spanish-speaking populations and parents who care about their child being able to access bilingual education, which they know pays in the marketplace in the end. Next slide, please. We asked parents also about which of the following are you currently doing to provide your children with a good future? And to our surprise, we found that over 63% said that they will give them time, attention, and love. And I think this is kind of what's happening because of inflation. Individuals are being able to have or taking time off because they don't have access to childcare, so they're able to spend more time and attention and spend that time with their children. Now, there are experiments happening across the country related to no strings attached social safety nets. In other words, through guaranteed income social safety network programs, providing parents with some time to deal with their own mental health challenges, but also giving them time to spend with their child and their loved ones. And so if you haven't been following, look at the research out there that of these experiments that are happening across the country, focused on this kind of a safety net. Next slide, please. So we asked respondents also about child development policies. We asked, many states across the country are considering increasing the state's investment in early childhood development and education capacity for families and young children. And do you support or oppose these state spending in these particular areas? And there's large support, everything ranging from increasing funding for early Head Start programs, increasing funding for parent and family engagement that supports learning resources, to increasing the compensation for early childhood educators who are really at the front line and providing them higher salaries, more benefits, figuring out summer pay for these families, increasing the funding for infant and family mental health services that are both culturally and linguistically responsive is of great concern for these Latino families. Next slide, please. So if you want to find out more about this survey, please click on this link. We're here to answer questions. Feel free to reach out to me, read the report. You'll find some things that weren't included in here, Latinos in the environment policy, bilingual education policy. So thank you for your time, and I'll turn it over to Javi.
Thank you, Dr. Vargas. That was very insightful. Thank you for running us through that data. And folks, I know there are tons of questions, I'm sure. So put those in the chat, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. Next, I want to go to my dear friend and collaborator, Tania Villarroel, who will be connecting all of this research and all of this data to a policy agenda. Now, you heard me speak earlier about the need to build that village. And so, all this great data is only as good as we are able to use it to move into action, particularly policies at the local, state, and federal level that can help us rebuild that village around our families, Latino families with young children, and really every child. So my friend Tania Villarroel comes to us by way of Unidos US, which is the country's largest Latino civil rights organization. She serves as senior policy analyst for early childhood education at Unidos US. And in her role, she focuses on driving a policy agenda that works to eliminate barriers to early childhood education and development for Latino infants. Prior to joining Unidos US, Tania held a position as research director at Acción Educar, providing research-based policy advice to policymakers on all education matters in her native country of Chile. Additionally, Tania successfully managed education projects in Zambia and Uganda during her tenure as executive director of the Entre Tribus Foundation. Tania holds a master's degree in law from Columbia University School of Law, as well as a law degree from the Universidad de Chile. Tania also serves as an assistant professor at Universidad de Chile's Law School. So without further ado, Tania Villarroel.
So gracias, Javier. Thank you very much for that introduction. I'm going to share my screen. If it works. You're seeing my slides, right?
We are seeing them.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, I'd like to start by thanking Abriendo Puertas, Opening Doors, for being such great partners in this vital work. I'd also like to thank BSP Research for this excellent survey. The data we just heard, it's concerning sometimes, and it should make all of us think, what can we do to address these issues? Many of the Latino community problems can be traced down to policies. And to change policies, first, we need to understand the problem clearly and hear the voice of the Latino community. And the National Latino Family Survey helps us know the Latino community better. But after we identify the problem, we need a plan. What policies should we focus on to solve the problems we identified? That's what the Latino Infant Initiative policy agenda aims to do. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Of course, it shouldn't stop there with just a plan. After we have a plan, we need to take action. We need everyone to share their story and advocate for the changes we need. So let me start by introducing the policy recommendations we think will help Latino infants and families thrive, so that in another conversation, we can talk about how to take action. Okay, so before we dive into the goals and recommendations of the policy agenda, let me tell you a little about how we drafted this report. The Latino Infant Initiative is a partnership between Unidos US and Abriendo Puertas. And before we even decided to draft a policy agenda, we gathered a group of experts. 16 people, advocates, program providers, researchers, parents, and we met throughout 2023, and they provided just invaluable guidance on our approach. We also wanted to ensure that the agenda was rooted in the experiences of the Latino community, so we took into consideration the data from the 2023 National Latino Family Survey. And now we are seeing how the 2024 National Latino Family Survey results also support the policy recommendations of the Latino Infant Initiative policy agenda. So when drafting the policy agenda, we decided not to focus solely on education, because as one of the advisory council members reminded us, families don't have the privilege of addressing their issues in silos. Everything is connected. That is why we identified 8 essential goals relating to education, health, economic security, and immigration. The first goal is access to quality early childhood education programs. The second one is to have a diverse and qualified early childhood education workforce. And the third one is having research-based family engagement and home visiting programs that are respectful of home language. In health, the goals are access to quality healthcare, including culturally and linguistically responsive mental health. Also, as health-related goals, we have access to nutritious food and gun safety. The 7th goal is securing economic well-being. And lastly, we recommend advancing policies for a dignified immigration. Now I'm going to explain briefly each one of the goals that I outlined here and how they are connected to the National Latino Family Survey results. So our first goal is access to high quality programs, which is the #1 priority to improve child well-being for Latino families this year. We need to make childcare more affordable, and we already saw this data. More than half Latino families have never sent their youngest child to childcare, and 1 in 3 haven't done it because they can't afford it. This is a tragedy, even more considering that 1 in 4 Latinos has been unable to work due to the lack of affordable childcare. We also need more bilingual programs. 91% of the respondents said that this is a quality they look for in childcare. So investing in programs such as Head Start, Early Head Start, childcare subsidies is vital for advancing this goal. Our second goal is having a diverse and well-trained early childhood education workforce. We know that Latino children benefit when they have teachers and caregivers who can speak their language and understand their experiences. This helps with supporting dual language learners and building a strong relationship with Hispanic families. But here's the challenge. We don't have enough early childhood teachers who can speak multiple languages. To fix this, we need to encourage the hiring of more bilingual teachers and create additional pathways to licensing. To make all of this happen, we of course need to enhance compensation. And we see that Latino families largely support these kind of policies. Additionally, it's essential to empower the early childhood education workforce with the skills to effectively work with dual language learners. This training is critical, especially since 1 in 5 early childhood education teachers and caregivers work in settings with high Hispanic enrollment. Our third goal centers around family engagement programs and preserving home language. How many of you have heard the advice or the idea that children that grow up with 2 languages get confused? This is very, very widespread. And we need to address this misinformation. We know that 90% of the families surveyed want their children to be bilingual. But we are well aware that there's a lot of misinformation out there. Unidos US conducted a survey, and we found that from the Latino families that had received speech therapy, 40% of them had received the advice not to speak Spanish to their children. Family engagement and home visiting could be a really important tool in addressing this and helping parents to advocate for themselves and confront misinformation, specifically regarding bilingualism. Our fourth goal focuses on ensuring access to healthcare. Can you guess the percentage of families that cannot afford mental health? You can think about this number. What's the number of parents that cannot, Latino parents that cannot afford mental health? The answer is 1 in 3 Latino parents cannot afford mental health. This underscores the urgency of improving access to healthcare for the Latino population. To achieve this, we must transform options offered by the federal government to states into guarantees. There's a lot of the access varies widely from state to state. For example, there's a 5-year waiting period for lawful immigrants to access Medicaid. Although states can waive this waiting period, only 35 states have done so. We need all the states to waive the waiting period to extend Medicaid coverage to 12 months, postpartum, and children's coverage to age 6. Additionally, we must prioritize greater access to culturally and linguistically responsive mental health services, because it's not just access to mental health. We need culturally and linguistically responsive mental health, especially considering that Latinas are 40% more likely to experience postpartum depression than non-Hispanic women. Our fifth goal centers on nutrition. Latino infants deserve access to healthy, affordable food. 35% of Latino families said that having greater access to fresh and healthy food is an improvement they would like to see in their neighborhood, and 45% said more access to programs such as WIC and SNAP would help them access more nutritious food. These programs should be supported and expanded. Gun violence also emerges as a top concern for parents in the 2023 and the 2024 National Latino Family Service. We think we need a comprehensive set of gun safety laws to address this pressing issue. Our seventh goal focuses on economic well-being. Latino children experience poverty at a higher rate than non-Latino children, with 27% living in poverty compared to 9% of white children. To achieve our goal, we propose the following. First, adopt a national paid family and medical leave program. Latinos are the least likely of any racial or ethnic group to have access to paid family leave through their employer at half the rate of whites. And second, expand child tax credit and the earned income tax credit. All of these policies are largely supported by the Latino community that responded to the National Latino Family Survey. Finally, we need dignity for immigrant families. To achieve this, we need to provide a pathway to citizenship and ensure regular training for ICE personnel who may come into contact with children. These are our 8 goals, and you can access the report and the 2024 National Latino Family Survey through these QR codes. And I want to finish with just one thought. Within the past 24 hours, 2,500 Latino babies were born in the US. Their first 3 years of life are critical and will shape their future. We need to implement these policies now because Latino children are depending on us. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Tania. Thank you for that very insightful and grounding conversation. As I stated earlier, all of this fantastic data, the last 3 surveys, the last 4 years or so of research are only as good as the action that we can drive behind that research in order to help us change the dynamics of our state and our country when it comes to these babies that are being born. There's probably another 3 that were born between the time you finished and now. So they're being born everywhere, and families are trying their best to give them the best life possible. One of the more special things of the work that we do, and Tanya, you alluded to this, in how we develop the policy agenda, bringing in people from different communities, different states, different walks of life to help us develop the policy agenda. With us today, we have a parent who is actively involved in the work, who is putting in the time, who is putting in the effort to help develop these policy ideas, to help implement these concepts to better her community, and in the process better all of our communities. I'm going to give you all a chance, those of you who don't speak Spanish or understand Spanish, I'm going to give you all a chance right now to hit your interpretation button at the bottom, because our next speaker will be delivering her remarks in Espanol, in Spanish. So please take a second to hit that interpretation button. At that point, you'll be able to hear the interpreter.
I'm going to switch to Spanish now. Cynthia Flores is a mom who is with us today to talk about her personal experience and perspective about this project that we are shaping here in Abriendo Puertas on our allies, Unidos US. Cynthia Flores is a mom of 2 kids in Riverside, California, where she lives. She is also an educator. She provides transport where she takes kids from their houses to the school, and she's going to give us the perspective as a mom about everything that you have heard today. So Cynthia, we are ready for you to hear your perspective, and because we know that you have a lot of valuable information about our community. Hello, good afternoon, good morning. Thank you for the introduction. I'm going to be very brief about my experience as a mom, as a Latina mom of 2 kids. My daughter Camila is 4, and my son Karim is just has 10 months. As a mom, as an experience,
como madre de familia,
to be able
el
to
encontrar
find
un centro
a childcare
donde puedan cuidar
center
mis
where I
hijos
can
ha
take my
sido un
kids has been
poquito
very
difícil
difficult because of different
debido
barriers
a las diferentes
that I have
barreras
encountered. As
que
an
esto
example,
conlleva, como por
being able to
ejemplo
choose the
elegir
correct
el
daycare
daycare
where
correcto, en donde
I can feel as a
yo
mom
sienta como padre y madre de
that
familia
that would
que este es
be the
el
perfect
centro
childcare
correcto,
for
donde
my
mis
kids,
niños
where
van a
they'll
estar
be safe
seguros,
and where
donde
they
mis niños
will
van a
gonna be
recibir la educación
receiving
y
the education
el
and the
tiempo
and the
correcto de
adequate
parte de la
time, education
institución.
time for the childcare.
Especialmente
I
yo me he sentido
have
con esa
seen these
barrera debido a
barriers
que
because
no
I don't
dispongo
have
de
a
la ayuda de
family
algún
member
familiar
that can help me
que me pueda
in
ayudar con
taking
mis
care of my
hijos,
kids.
entonces he
So
tenido que
I
tener la
have
situación de
to
encontrar ahora
find
sí
a
que un
childcare
centro
center where I can
donde
leave my
puedan
kids
cuidar de mis hijos
while I'm
durante
working and my
mamá y
husband is
papá
working.
están trabajando. Ahora bien,
Another of the barriers that I
otra de
have
las barreras que he
seen
tenido,
is
perdón,
the cost
es el costo
of
del cuidado
childcare within
de
in
mis
those
niños
centers,
en ese
because I
centro, ya
know
que
that because of
yo entiendo debido
inflation
a la
and the high
inflación,
cost
al
in
costo de vida, todos los
living,
precios
everything
están
has gone up.
súper
As an
altos.
example,
Debido a que, por
I can
ejemplo,
provide
ah,
an
le
example.
voy a dar un ejemplo,
My son's
el cuidado de mi hijo de
childcare
10
is
meses
the highest,
es el
is
más alto, son
$390 weekly.
$390
So
semanales.
not all
Entonces,
families
no todas
can
las familias podemos ahora sí que
afford
tener
this amount
accesibilidad a pagar
weekly.
eso semanalmente.
Because of that,
Por lo
I
tanto,
know that there are
yo
different
sé que existen
programs
diferentes
and
programas,
subsidies
subsidios de programas
that
donde
can
pueden
help
ayudar
families in
a
the
diferentes familias de
community
la
to be
comunidad
able to
a
afford or
poder
access
tener
these types
acceso
of childcare. But
al
even
cuidado
with
de
that,
sus niños. Pero aún así,
there needs to be a
tiene que haber
balance
como un balance
between the
entre el
income
ingreso
level of
del
parents
padre a los
and
niveles
the
de
thresholds
que el
that the
gobierno
government
tiene para
establishes
cuando
to be able to
necesitan
access these
evaluar el
services,
ingreso de la
uh,
familia para así ellos determinar si
the
usted es elegible
thresholds
a los
that they
programas
provide for
que disponen o
eligibility
los
for these
programas de
programs. For
subsidios
me,
que
it's
ellos dan.
been very difficult
Para mí ha sido muy
because
difícil porque
it's not something
no
easy
es
to
algo
navigate
fácil
because we
porque
have
tenemos
other bills
otras
that we need
cosas
to
que
pay.
pagar, etcétera. Pero
Even with
aún
that,
así, yo considero que
I consider, sorry,
perdón, otro tipo de estudios
that we
para
need to
poder
have more research
reevaluar los
done
niveles
or to
de
have other
ingreso
types
a que
of
ellos se basan
requirements
como los
to be able to
padres
be
de
eligible for these
familia
programs
para
and
así
not just
poder
income,
ellos dar
so
un
that
mejor
we can have better access to
acceso
these
a la
programs and
elegibilidad
be
de los
able to be
programas
eligible
y poder así uno tener
for these
acceder
programs,
a los diversos programas
subsidized
de ayuda que
programs.
ellos dan.
In my
Como
experience,
mi experiencia,
I was
gracias a Dios,
able to find
encontré el
the
lugar o los
correct
lugares perfectos
centers for
para
my
mis
kids,
niños. Pero en
but
sí,
that has
esa ha
been my
sido mi
experience
experiencia de buscar la seguridad
to
y
be able
mi estabilidad
to,
emocional, al igual que mis niños,
this has
de
helped
tener
me with my
esa
mental health and my
importancia
economic
como
stability
padre
by
de que ellos están seguros
understanding
en
that
un
they're
lugar
in a safe
que los
space
atienden
where they
y
are being
que
taken
proveen
care
los
of
mejores
and that
servicios
they
y
have
ante
a good
todo
service.
una buena comunicación con los
It's a
padres, un
center
centro
that's
que sea
bilingual,
bilingüe,
a
un
center
centro
that
que
has
se
a good
dedique
communication with
con
parents, and
pasión a lo que
also
hace
a
y no
center
nada
that
más a
has
nivel monetario.
compassion and is not just
Espero que
interested in the
les haya
profits.
servido un
So
poco
thank you. I hope
mi
that my experience
experiencia
illustrates
y
the
muchas
data that
gracias.
you just shared. Thank you.
You are on mute, Javier.
Gracias por compartir su experiencia.
Thank you
Después de
for
4 años
sharing
y
your
que
experience. Sorry, I
ya
was
debo
on
de
mute for a
aprender a hacer
second.
eso, pero bueno, aquí
Thank you for
estamos.
sharing your
Gracias
experience,
por compartir
Cynthia.
su experiencia, Cynthia. Thank you for sharing your expertise, and also I was saying after 4 years on Zoom, you would think I didn't know how to hit the unmute button, but here we are. Let's go to we've got a number of questions both in the Q&A and then others that came in before. So why don't we take the time to dive through some of those questions, and then we'll leave at the end here with a call to action. So what I'll do is, if our panelists don't mind, if I call on them specifically, I'm going to do my best to target the questions to who I think would have a response. But if anyone else on the panel would like to chime in, please do so. I'll start with a tough one. And this one is coming in through the Q&A. And I'm going to go to Dr. Vargas for this one, given your public health expertise, Dr. Vargas. But what resources do our collective groups or communities have to remove the stigma of mental health, especially with regard to men?
Yeah, great question. Again, this growing trend of, first of all, how do we get to this point as men? Because in some ways, what people are saying is that people are spending more time with their kids, right? So they're working maybe a little bit less than they would normally work, and they're spending more time with their children and being a parent, which then is making them more isolated from their networks of, whether it be maybe you're on a softball team or whatever social group, right? And so it's a double-edged sword. Like, you're spending more time with your children, but I think resources and stuff that could be out there is figuring out ways to like parent, like father meetups with kids, situations where there's education about how to parent. Not all dads know how to parent, how to play with their kid, for example, how to read to their kid. Putting them in front of the TV does not work. It's not good for our kids. And so part of this is training, providing opportunities that are social for us to get together to deal with the mental health. Now, I want to also talk about this in terms of education. Because what we're seeing as my role as a professor too at the university is that I'm seeing a bunch of Latino students who get to the college level, and maybe there are programs at the university that allow you, for example, to take more time to take tests, to allow you ability to get some kind of help at the university. But you can't do that unless you've been seen by a professional. So you go your whole life without health insurance, you get to college, and now you have to provide all this documentation, right? The administrative burden. So one is decreasing the administrative burden to get resources. Like, for example, extra time on a test, or special kind of what we call disability type of services that are mental health disability services. A large number of Latino students have never seen a professional. And so they get to the college, and we're also seeing in the situation where this is going to be arguably the most important time for them to provide them skills and become, for example, move into a different economic bracket, for example. So I would say resources, and then trying to provide networks and social interaction with groups.
Thank you, Dr. Vargas. And that's a great connector to the next question, or a great segue to the next question. And I'm going to go to Cynthia for this one.
Cynthia, we have a question for you from the audience. And the question is, when we are advocating for kids and our families in schools, what strategies so that we're not labeled as that parent that's always complaining, or that mom that is just there in the school all the time without anything productive to do? So how can we be effective advocates for kids and be consistent without being labeled as a problematic parent, or a parent that's always complaining? Well, I think that we need to be informed as parents about the different resources that are available in the community, and also be on the know about the programs, be informed I think that that's
Yo
what's
pienso que es
the
lo
most
más
important,
importante y que no
so that
tache
we're
como
not
esta,
labeled that way, because at the end of
porque
the
al
day,
final del día la
what is
importancia
important
es
is
del
for the
padre para ver
parent
si su
to
hijo
be
o hija
informed
va a
if
recibir la
their kids are
educación
receiving the
adecuada. Entonces yo
quality
considero
education.
que
So
no
I
importa
feel
si
like
te
it's,
tachen
I
cuando el
mean, I
parente
really
está
don't
como
care if
muy
somebody is
buscando aquí y
labeled
allá,
as,
pero la importancia y
as
la
a
estabilidad
problematic parent. But
como padre
what is
de que tu
important is
hijo va a
making sure
recibir
that
la
your
mejor
kids are
educación
receiving
es lo
quality information, and
primordial,
that's what is
informarte.
important, be informed.
Muy bien, así es que
So we have two suggestions:
dos
to
sugerencias
be an
suyas,
informed
el ser un
parent,
padre informado, una madre
to be
informada
able
para
to
poder
go
entrar a la
to
escuela
school
con la
with the information.
y
So
no nada
not
más ir a
just to go
quejarse, sino
and
llevar la
complain,
información.
and
Y luego,
even if
número dos,
we are
aunque se nos
labeled
tache,
that way,
tenemos
we
que
need
ser
to continue
abogados
to
por
advocate for our
nuestros
kids,
hijos
because our
porque
kids are the most
pues
important,
nuestros hijos son lo más importante,
are
¿verdad?
the most important part of our lives. So
That I think it's a good synopsis of these webinars, right, that we're doing. And to Cynthia's point, as parents, and I'm calling us all parents, even if we don't have children of our own, all of these children are our children ultimately. But how do we advocate for our children effectively and impactfully? And that is informing ourselves, doing the research, having the data available to us so that we can show up armed with that data, armed with that information. And in our advocacy, we can be fearless and we can be effective and impactful if we are armed with that information. I've got a question here that came in through our registration link.
Quickly, Javi, can I add something here too about this?
Yeah, please jump in.
I think there's a bias that the way they treat moms versus the way they treat dads. I think we have to understand that there is a bias that exists, and I get more of the ask when I do it than when my wife does it. And so I just want to say that out loud, that understand that there is a bias against women in advocating. And if you're a dad, you're just seen as a really good dad, like an amazing dad, when you're doing the same job as a woman. So I just want to say that maybe figuring out a way how to use fathers and dads to ask for the things could be helpful.
Thank you for sharing that and grounding us in that. I completely agree. I completely agree with that sentiment and that fact. Tanya, I'm gonna put you on the spot next, and this is a tough question, but I think you and Unidos have been doing a great deal of work, not necessarily on your team, but I know you guys are very active in this work. The question is this: how are we preparing to help undocumented families for potential immigration law changes after the upcoming elections?
It is a tough question. I can say it's a tough question as an immigrant myself. And I know this is something that's been in the mind of many people. And I want to continue on the same idea that Cynthia was mentioning. Informing ourselves is so important. Keeping, looking for that information. Unidos US website has a lot of information about immigration and about many other policy issues. And it's not only directed to policymakers, it's directed for any kind of audience. So also Abriendo Puertas has a lot of resources. So my suggestion would be inform yourself. Try to go to these spaces where there's that information available, those resources, and try to prepare yourself. Always being calm. Mental health is really important too. And just be prepared mentally and psychologically to whatever what will happen.
Thank you, Tanya. That's absolutely right. And look, if I may add, I think too, that's part of what this work is about. It's about helping our families fulfill their potential, their aspirational goals. The reason many of us are here is because of sacrifices made by parents, grandparents, maybe great-grandparents. Yet here we are making a life for ourselves in this country. And so it can be really tricky, I think, sometimes as elections come and go, different issues are put on the table as a political debate when in fact our lives should not be part of political gamemanship as we've seen in the past. So absolutely agree with you. Information is power, knowledge is power. Being able to know what's going on in our community is powerful because we become better advocates. So in that light, I've got exciting news for all of you. We are launching a number of webinars kicked off by this one and moving on through the months of April and May to help inform ourselves. And so some of those webinars will deal with the budget. And I know it's not the sexiest, most appealing thing ever, but budgets are values statements made by local, state, and federal governments. And so in that light, we're going to take two of the target states where we all work in, and we're going to present two webinars on the respective budget processes of those states. And Josefina, if you can go to the next slide, please. That'll show the dates of our webinars. We're going to start with a California budget primer, which will take place on April, not October, on April the 10th. I'm sorry, April the 2nd, 2024, a California set budget primer. For those folks in California, we understand that there's a pretty depressing budget deficit that you all are dealing with. And this is a prime opportunity to inform ourselves and advocate on behalf of the programs that we feel strongly about, that our families have told us they care about and they need, including things like childcare, healthcare, housing, food benefits, etc. That budget primer, like I said, will be on April 2nd. Following that, we'll have a budget primer on the New Mexico state budget, which will take place on April 16th. We will be joined by local experts who will debrief with all of you the recently concluded state legislative session budget that passed, and that should be, we expect the governor to sign any day now. In May, we're going to pivot to some policy oriented webinars with the Whole Learner Act. The Whole Learner Act is a collaboration between a national organization called America Forward, as well as several of the people here on this Zoom call, and organizations across the country, which is the Whole Learner Act is a piece of legislation at the federal level that would create opportunities for students and teachers to ensure that children are not only seen as a number, as a test score, but that we're building those wraparound services around children and their families, including access to behavioral health, including access to adult basic education for the parents, as well as family engagement opportunities. Then from there, we'll move on to more proactive policy ideas. In this case, baby bonds. Baby bonds is a national movement that is seeking to bridge the wealth gap between families of color and ensuring that our babies get a fair shake by establishing state-level, state-sponsored baby trust funds. That'll be on May 21st. In the meantime, we're also developing, in conjunction with Unidos US and the Latino Infant Policy Agenda, a policy advocacy platform, which we will invite all of you to register for and engage in. It'll give us an opportunity to advocate at the local, county, city, municipal level, at the state legislative level, as well as the federal level. This will be rolled out in the next several weeks, and we expect that tool to be really help bridge the technology gap between how we advocate in our communities and how we can be more efficient and more impactful in our advocacy. I'd like to thank Dr. Edward Vargas for his time and sharing his expertise with us. Tania Villarroel from our partners at Unidos US, not only for sharing the Latino Infant Initiative Policy Agenda with us today, but for all of your work over the last several years alongside us to help develop this concept, as well as Cynthia Flores for helping support and ground this work, this webinar, this National Family Survey in real, very honest and personal terms. It is for the parents and it is for the children that we do this work. And without you, we cannot do it effectively and impactfully. So thank you very much. With that, we will be sharing a recording of this webinar. It'll be on our web pages, respective web pages of the respective organizations, and we will send a recording to all of you who have graciously afforded us an hour of your time today, so that you can share with your networks as well. Thank you very much. We appreciate you listening in and tuning in. And onward, adelante, si se puede.